whenever you put yourself out there, YouTube
Yeah.
videos, podcasts, whatever, there's
Yeah.
always going to be people that maybe don't like what you're up to, and getting comfortable with that and saying, that's okay because my values are this. And as long as I'm living by my values, it doesn't really matter. Running a business on the internet and being an entrepreneur is the ultimate self-development journey. Like, you're working through all your shadow stuff because you're like, is this ego? Is this a desire to help people? Like, where is this coming from?
Welcome to People Watching, a podcast where we figure out what it looks like to become the role model we've always wanted by talking with real people who have found real role models in their own lives. I'm Megan Robinson. Every week, I sit down with a guest, and together we cut through all the noise and identify better sources of hope, creativity, and wisdom as we learn to make decisions about the kind of life we want to live. So join us. Let's do some people watching. My guest today is Marie Poulin, and y'all, I'm so excited. They say you should never meet your heroes, but this one turned out pretty stinking awesome. I've been following Marie online for 4 or 5 years now, ever since I discovered Notion as a tool for my personal productivity and thinking. And I have learned so much from Marie. Not just about how to build and work in Notion, but also about how to explore and understand how my brain, energy, and creativity work. Marie is the co-founder of Oki Doki and the creator of Notion Mastery, an online program and community that helps creators, entrepreneurs, and small teams tame their work and life chaos by building life and business management systems with Notion and supporting technologies. When she's not tinkering in Notion or doing live trainings, you can find her in the garden, playing softball, or cooking up some delicious vegetarian tacos, which y'all know we will be talking about. Marie and I talked about how entrepreneurship is the ultimate self-development journey, about how her ADHD diagnosis put so much about her personal history into perspective, and about how role models give us the space and the freedom to fully express ourselves. Of course, we also nerded out a bit about Notion. One of the beautiful strengths of Marie's presence in the Notion productivity and personal development space is that she truly demonstrates how any tool that works for you can become your personal conversation partner. One of the things that I really took away from this conversation with Marie is just what a teacher she is. And I think that this comes from her lifelong love for learning, her deep curiosity about herself, about the world, about other people, and her generosity in being able to translate her learning into insights that truly resonate with others and help them flourish in their own lives. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. And we're in the studio. Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm so excited to have you here to talk with you, Marie, to connect. One of the amazing benefits of technology is the fact that we're on opposite ends of the continent and we can connect. And I love that.
I love this. Yeah, super excited to be here.
Thank you. So, as we get started, I always love to share with guests the touchstones, expectations, or pop up rules for our conversation, for each other, for our listeners. So, Marie, would you start us off by reading the first bit of text and then we can alternate?
Absolutely. Whatever we share is by invitation, not obligation. If either of us is not comfortable pursuing a topic, let's just say, I'd prefer not to share. Thank you.
Yes. And silence is also a partner in our conversation. Feel free to take a moment to reflect without immediately filling the space with words. Leave room for the inner teacher to whisper too.
Be present as fully as possible. This is a space to acknowledge our doubts, fears, and failings as much as it is a space to share our joys, convictions, and successes.
And ask open, honest questions. If we're not sure what the other meant in the question or statement, ask. It gives us a chance to clarify or rephrase. And ask questions that we genuinely don't know the answer to. Surprise is a great catalyst of insight.
Awesome.
Marie, as we get started, I feel like I know some things about you already from YouTube, from your different appearances around the web. But what I love to find out is just the things in your life journey that stand out to you as meaningful, that you feel have really shaped you and that have brought you to who you are today.
Oh, that's such a big question. Where do we begin?
All right,
For me to
ones
bring a
you have
moment.
15 hours.
Yeah. I'll give maybe the Coles notes and you could dig in on anything that you might find interesting. But I grew up in a pretty blended family. So I lived with my mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, brother, sister, and uncle. And so it was a pretty full house. And I would consider myself an introvert in a world of extroverts. And so I was pretty motivated, I think, as I got into my high school years. I felt the sense of chaos in the household that I needed to get out. And so I did summer school and night school every year through high school so that I could graduate early.
Fun.
Um, and to go off to university on my own. So I was really keen to, yeah, start off on my own, break out of the sort of patterns of my household. There's some tension there. Happy to chat about some of the complexities of the upbringing, but just really needed to find some peace, find my own path. Getting an education for me symbolized freedom. So if I worked really
Nice.
hard and could put myself in a different environment and could educate myself and find a different path for myself. I was really motivated to do that. I didn't know at the time I have ADHD. I was diagnosed as an adult. I think we missed it maybe because, oh, well, Marie's, always doing her schoolwork and I was very driven to get out of the household. It wasn't that I was so excited about schooling per se, but I think schooling was this like beacon of hope of being able to do something
No.
different. Um,
Mm,
and as long as I was interested or highly motivated, I was able to do the work to just get the grade enough so that I could get a foot in the door and get to
mhm.
school. Made my way to university where I studied design school for 4 years and got my Bachelor of Design and honors. And then, yeah, continued on in a various in turns there, but I'm happy to talk about any of those
Yeah.
milestones that might be in that
Yeah.
journey.
I've always been very taken with what you've shared of your Notion space and like the attention to aesthetics and how it feels. And
Mhm.
so I did wonder if you had a design background or if you had some sort of background more than just, oh, I like this template, I'll plug it in.
Yeah, I took drawing lessons when I was young and I was obsessed. I was always drawing all the time. I could spend hours and hours just drawing and painting and pastel and just I was always making things. And as I got older, I remembered my grandpa making a comment that about being a starving artist. And they were all very supportive of doing art, but this sort of idea that I got was art doesn't pay the bills. Studying graphic design felt like this way of still doing what you love, but in a way that felt like there was some commercial application. So that was the beginnings
Yeah.
of, okay, how can I channel this in some way? Because I know I'm a creator and I think maybe
Right.
sensitive to the way things look, the way things touch. If you're growing up in a very cluttered environment, there's a certain impact that has on maybe the way that you see things. And so I think I've always been very sensitive to how information is visually presented to me will impact the way that I'm understanding it and interpreting it. Like math is
Mm,
definitely challenging. I'm not very good at math. Even things like calculating the tip at the table. There's such an anxiety around that there's a
yeah.
self-consciousness around feeling stupid around really basic
Sure.
math concepts. But as
Yeah.
an adult, I've begun to understand, okay, yes, I can be more aware of my strengths and weaknesses and whatnot. And understanding that my brain interprets information a little bit differently, knowing
Yeah.
how much the visual component of something is both what can make something very exciting and helps me piece together things. And so I didn't know when I was making these YouTube videos and sharing, here's how I do things in Notion. I was really just finding ways to help my brain manage what felt like chaos, right? You're running
Yeah.
your own business, the deal that you're marketing, you're also having to deal with taxes, you're having to be amazing at communication. There's so many moving parts that you have to deal with and making beautiful landing pages. And you have to be good at a lot of different things. So things
Yeah.
always felt chaotic. And for me, Notion was a place that it felt like I could bring the chaos into a place, but display it in a way that It's not
Mhm.
all there all the time. It allows
Sure.
me to dive into context in a way that was helpful for my brain. So I think
Yeah.
in a way, using Notion and getting really good at Notion, one, it suited my brain, and it also helped me, I think, realize my ADHD, because there were so many people with ADHD that were like, "Oh, I love the way you present things." And
Yeah. Yeah.
so many people that were signing up for my courses identified as having ADHD long before I was
Mm.
diagnosed. So that, why is there such a high percentage of people with ADHD coming into my work, and it's resonating with them? What's happening
Okay.
there? So I started digging a little more and was like, I realized maybe the way that I consume information or present information may be a little different than the and seems to really align with certain people's different ways
Yeah.
of thinking. So it's been interesting to take that journey.
Yeah. I think that was the big, I forget how I discovered Notion a few years ago. And at the time, because I was the same way, there's a reason I went into poetry and theology in school because math and science.
Exactly.
I mean, I lo- my best friend since we were 5 years old. She and I would go out to dinner years ago, and I, when it came time to do the bill and the tip, it would be a little embarrassing. Like we're in our 20s. We should know. We should be able to figure this out at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do get that, and I get that sense of. I always thought when I was younger, like my grand ambition was to be a starving artist in an attic somewhere. That's what I was gonna do. I was gonna be a poet and a writer. That's
Yeah.
what you do. But it's so interesting that you mentioned the art background, like the concept, like the drawing, the fine art, and then that adjacent career that seems more acceptable from making a
Yeah.
living. Another guest on the show on this season that I talked with, she also had a similar like childhood where she was always drawing and she's a science illustrator now.
Oh,
And
wow.
she got started in like comic book design and graphic design because that was make a living career for what she
Yeah.
her skill. So that's just so interesting. That's artists seem to be getting punted into this, go into graphic design, something like that as a way to make your money. Or I, I- well, put a pin in that. I want to
That's yeah.
um yeah, and I'm very curious. So it's so interesting about the ADHD because I've talked about this with a friend of mine, and we've both said about ourselves, I don't think we have it, but there's a lot of stuff when ADHD people talk about how they process information or how they get things done.
That
And more
resonates a little
that
bit.
really resonates. And that really that makes a lot of sense because I've dealt with chronic illness most of my life. Energy is a
Uh-huh.
huge factor. I have to be
Absolutely.
so aware of what I'm mentally, emotionally, physically capable of doing on any given not just any given day, sometimes any given hour.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that was one of the things when I first discovered Notion. Notion was for me also a place of discovering how my brain worked. Like how do I
Yeah.
store information? And it was also for me a place of finally like taking what was subterranean my whole life and bringing to the surface and being able to articulate, oh, wow, I'm really good at systems thinking. I'm really good at thinking about process and how all of this fits together.
Yeah.
And I remember there was I can't remember if it was a newsletter that you sent out or comment. Is, like I said, I've been following you for a
One of
while.
the many channels that we, yeah, connect on.
And you had made the comment that one of your bosses looked at some sort of automation or process you set up and was like, I can't tell if you're really lazy or really brilliant. And was that one of the signals for you about systems and process design?
Yeah, like, I think I didn't it takes receiving those signals a few times before you start to clue in, right, when people are reflecting back to you. And I actually had an incredibly challenging client. I think one of the hardest clients that I ever had. And she said, "I don't know if you know this about yourself. The thing that you are really excellent at is you have a way of seeing the big picture, like the way things connect." Um, And the way she articulated that, I was like, okay, no one had really explained it to me in that way. And
Mhm.
then once you get clued into it, and then you start to notice maybe other people noticing it, or you start to see it reflected back to you in different ways in the way that you show up at work, or different coaches would reflect that back. And I was like, oh,
Mm.
it's like a fish in water. You don't know you're in water. It's just the way your brain has always worked. So suddenly when you're like, wait a second, this could be an advantage. Like maybe there is a way that I'm seeing things that other people don't, or this is the way that I can lean into. And it is actually a strength and a skill of mine. So there were
Yeah.
little clues along the way when you look and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, pattern matching,
Yeah.
big picture thinking and seeing how things connect in systems. And I
Yeah.
do think maybe the systems obsession a little bit it is partly I don't want to do this mundane work. So if I can systemize and streamline and automate pieces of that, I think this sort of maybe curiosity, obsession about systems and whatnot was like, this mundane work is so uninteresting to me. And I know that I can't thrive if I'm having to do the same kinds of work all the time. So there was this desire to, there's got to be an easier way. How can we make this less boring so that I can focus on the creative parts that are really
Right.
exciting and where I can thrive. So maybe you can
Mhm.
relate to that in the systems help us be able to do the fun stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I did a lot of administrative and operational work, like, early career, and as a creative person, this and you make a living somehow, and I was
Yeah.
putting myself through school and all of this stuff, and I just remember having that same, like, "I do not wanna spend my day doing this."
Yeah.
You
And
know?
I don't know if you find it's fun in the beginning because you're like defining the system. You're like, oh, this is new. But then once the system's
Yeah,
in place, you're like, okay, I did that work. I don't want to keep, can I move on to the next thing?
yeah.
Right.
Or, "Oh, I just settled into how this process works. Let me pull it all apart and rebuild it again."
Yes. Let me optimize. It's got to be a different way to do this. Yeah. Yeah.
Very
Absolutely.
much, very much. And you were saying that you had maybe were able to mask a little bit earlier in your life or just able to adapt and perform for most of it before you got your ADHD diagnosis. What was that like, that process of clarity? What do you feel it changed for you, if it changed
Oh, of
anything?
getting diagnosed? Oh, yeah. I remember feeling at the time, it was such a profound feeling of before and after, where like
Oh,
having that knowledge was like, oh my gosh, this colors so much of this past struggle
mm,
and
yeah,
gives some sort of explanation for things that you're like, why is this so challenging for me when I feel like I'm an adult woman who should have these basic skills? Like, why is this still a challenge for me? So there's a lot of, I think, shame and self-judgment. And I think a lot of folks with ADHD feel a lot of shame for just like things that should be easier
right.
that just aren't. My sister has ADHD. It presents very differently, and I'd say very extremely. So I always thought, oh,
Oh,
that's what ADHD looks like, where you can't
okay,
even function in school. There's just like this
okay.
sort of oppositional defiance disorder. So it just
Mm,
never even occurred to me because I was able to go to school. I was able to graduate and find something in my interests and be able to find a job that worked for me. And so there were differences in our behaviors that it just didn't seem like a possibility. A number of people are coming into the course saying they have ADHD. I'm like, okay, weird. I seem to be attracting even a lot of my friends. Interesting. I seem to be like a magnet for people with ADHD. And so
yeah, yeah.
I was researching it a little bit because I wanted to understand my students better and I wanted
Mm,
to my sister better. I wanted to understand friends better in my network. So I was doing a little bit of research on it and trying to understand what does it really mean and how do symptoms present. And they often present very different in women and men as well. And there was
okay.
a lot of stereotypes around the hyperactive little boy. That has been a sort of stereotype for a while. And so it wasn't until seeing this one YouTube video where there was a psychologist that said he was listing off really uncommon or not as well known symptoms of ADHD. And one of them was extreme difficulty waking up in the morning.
Mm,
And because this has been a problem my
okay.
entire life, showing up late to work. I once slept in on a workshop that I myself was delivering. Like
Oh,
proper embarrassing ways that this is how they assess ADHD. Lots of folks experience symptoms of losing their keys and sleeping in, or like we all experience these symptoms in some form or
oh,
another. But the question is, how disruptive is this to your life, to your livelihood, to your relationships in a chronic fashion from
okay,
childhood to adulthood? Is there a
okay.
consistency in these behaviors and how they manifest, and how disruptive are they to your life to be able to maintain
Okay.
relationships. So when I heard some of these symptoms, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not just useless or lazy, or like these
Mhm.
sort of judgments that we have about ourselves. I was like, there's something different about the way I use energy, the way I process information, the way my chronology works. All of it is just, it just has a different way of being. And when you work against it all the time for years and years, it's exhausting. So
Sure.
to have that clarity was like, oh my goodness. And they're asking you so many personal questions in rapid succession.
Okay.
Have you ever been fired? Have you ever been fired from a job? Have you ever cheated on a
Mhm.
partner? Have you ever, like, all of these questions to get a health history and a behavioral history? And when you start answering them one after another, I'm like, when you put it that way, it does really seem quite obvious, doesn't it? So
Yeah, yeah.
at the end of it, he's, what do you want to get out of this? I was like, I just wanted to know if, do I have ADHD? And he's, oh, yes, of course you do. And I was like, what? Okay, that's really all I just wanted some confirmation. Is this what I'm working with? And he's, I don't think you need medication per
Mm.
se, based on the way that you've self assessed. You seem to have really created a support network for yourself. The fact that you've been able to craft a job where you're able to work with your energy and do what you need to do, and you're making a living. Like, it's very rare that people with ADHD that are unmedicated can achieve
Oh,
that level of
wow.
success. And so he's
Oh,
like, kudos to you that you've managed
sure.
to make a living for yourself. And if you get to the point that your struggles are such that it's actually impairing your ability to make a living and whatnot, then we can reassess. But I
Mm.
think you seem to have what you need right now. So it was more like a, I just want to know, check the box, is this the case? Because then I
Yeah.
can learn from other people with ADHD and learn about, like, how the brain receptors work with dopamine, understanding it's like a dopamine regulation
Mm.
issue. It's an attention
Okay.
regulation issue. Um, anyway, long-winded way of just saying, having that information to give context to maybe past mistakes, failures, shame really helped me have a whole lot more self-compassion for
Yeah.
me, but
Yeah.
then also understand what my students are struggling with when they're coming in the door, and have
Mm.
the framing, the language, being able to speak to it in a different way. So it was a mind-blowing experience to get to go through
Yeah.
that.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. I know a couple years ago, I was diagnosed with PTSD. And like I had had the suspicion over a while.
Yeah.
And I think what really kicked me, and I have been going to a therapist for unrelated reasons. And I think what kind of made me go into my one session one day was my boss had said, I need you to take a meeting with these people, this department in our organization. And I didn't sleep for 2 days because of the anxiety
Yeah.
and because of how upset it made
Yeah.
me.
In the
And I
anticipation
was
of
like,
it.
yeah, and that was
Yeah.
the thing. This is not normal. And that was the kind of thing I had enough self-awareness to go, my
Mm,
reactions to things are disproportionate to the thing. And so I asked my therapist and she gave me a little questionnaire and she
mm.
totaled it up. She goes, oh, wow, I didn't expect you to score that high. And I was like, yay, overachiever
There's
me.
a reason. I mean, yes, I win.
But I had that same sense of relief of being like, okay, I have a label for this thing. I can now hang it on this hook and be like, now we'll do something with it. I can work
Yeah.
with this now. And there is something really wonderful, freeing about having words to
Absolutely.
encapsulate what you're dealing with or what you're trying to figure out. And yeah, so not thankfully, it was like a more situational thing. And I think we're mostly over it, but we'll see. But
There's always to be done, right?
yeah. But as you look back on your life, did you grow up in a faith tradition as part of your family environment? Has that been part of your journey at all?
It has not at all. And I will say that I think my family probably leans more toward the anti-religion, like
Sure.
actively making fun of religions for sure, and
Sure.
a
Yeah.
disdain for the church. So didn't really grow up with that. I think when we were
Mm.
very young, we went to church because everyone went to church. It was down the street. And then I remember
Sure.
getting to a certain age and parents were like, do you guys still want to go? We're like, we were just young kids, like not understanding even what it was about.
Sure.
So we stopped going, and it just never.
Yeah.
So I consider myself a spiritual person,
Yeah.
but not a religious person per se.
Mm.
So it
Yeah.
was not really a
Yeah.
big
I'm always
influence. Yeah.
curious because I
Yeah.
think I grew up completely opposite that. I grew up in a small fundamentalist Christian church. And I think when I hit my teens, I was the one going, why? 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 And my parents were, here, why?
Interesting. Yeah, yeah.
And we didn't leave the Christian faith, but just maybe this way of doing it is not most healthy or the most helpful way.
Right.
And my own professional and personal career has been within faith-based institutions off and on. But I'm just always curious, just that dimension to life, like how we attend to it and how we navigate it.
What's interesting about that too is one of the first jobs that I got out of university was with this wonderful tiny one-man studio called Think House Design in Toronto. And that became the job that I did for the first 4 years out of school.
Okay.
And Christian family, a lot of the projects that he took on, Christian organizations, nonprofits. So most of the work that I was doing in my early design career was for Christian organizations.
Oh,
And it was
fun.
really interesting to me because I was like, okay, this is a world I don't know a lot
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
My boss is a religious person and leads a
Yeah.
life and had just a very different way of being in the world than I did.
Yeah.
But it was my first example, I think, of what healthy Christianity looked like to me.
Mm.
Because I had examples of I had a Catholic friend who would say she would pray for our friend group because we were all going to hell. There were, like, tensions in there that I hadn't really seen really good, healthy examples of what judgmental religion looked like. Can you be a Christian and not judge people that maybe don't believe the same as you? And so I just never really understood how to navigate that world, and so suddenly now
Okay.
I'm with someone I respect, I admire, I consider a huge mentor to me. Like, I spent 4 years of my life me and him working every day in his basement in his home studio. So, like,
Yeah.
I got to know him so well and his family so well. But there was a point where I was like, most of the projects that I'm working on are faith-based projects, let's say 90% of them. And I don't
Um,
necessarily feel like a strong calling toward these like I think it's great what they're doing. That's great.
Sure.
But I need some more variety, I think, and even things that are
Yeah.
more aligned with my own interests and values. And
Yeah.
so it felt like there was a timeline there where I'm like, this is great, this is good experience and it's cool. But I know I need something that feels a little more aligned with what I do. But it was cool to have, I think, a different example to open my
Yeah.
mind about like religion can look so different, faith can look so different, Christianity can look so different from person to person. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to mean that people are closed-minded or bigoted, or there's lots of different ways that it could look. And so that was
Yeah.
like a sort of eye-opening experience for me to become a little more open-minded too and accepting
Yeah. Yeah.
different views than mine.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Thanks so much for sharing. I know it, I've encountered whole spectrums of people who either live up to the best of what they
Yeah,
profess or make you go, okay.
exactly. And there's people like that in every religion or non-religion. And so it's like, well,
Exactly.
yeah.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this conversation so far. One thing I often find frustrating about listening to other people talk about how they've made changes in their own lives is figuring out how to do that for myself. Maybe you feel the same way? If so, I would love to help you take what you learned and apply it into your own life. But I can't do that without knowing what you would find most helpful. So tell me. I'll put a link in the description below so you can fill out a quick, easy form and let me know your thoughts, because I know you have them. Thanks for being here. Now, let's get back to the conversation. I would love to know, one of the things that I'm really trying to explore in conversation with on this podcast and my own life and thinking is just that idea of, you described so beautifully, like someone who lived out what they believed in a healthy way that kind of showed you something different. But I would love to step back a little bit and think about that idea of a role model or that kind of influence. And I would love to hear what comes up for you when you think about a role model, when you think about someone who influences you or shows you a way of life.
I mean, there's certainly a number of people that I regularly think, what would that person think? And it ranges from friends to coaches, people that I've hired over the years, and people whose just work I followed because their words resonate. Tanya Geisler is a coach that I hired, a leadership coach who
Okay.
has just had an immense impact on me. And the way she shows up with so much generosity, it's shocking and astounding to me how generous of a person she is. And so seeing other people who model maybe aspects of myself that I want to be a generous person in this world, and I think I am, but there's also a feeling of when you get really energized and you give a lot away and you're not as boundaried with your energy, it's easy to
Yeah,
overdo it,
I
overcommit, the
gotcha.
people pleasing. So
Mhm.
looking to examples of people who are generous but still have really healthy boundaries, I think
Okay.
has been really helpful for me. So that's one example for me. Tara McMullen is another example of someone that I've followed. She's probably maybe the first business person that I followed. I was still working at Think House at the time, so it was long before I was even self-employed. And she was an example of self-employed woman selling products on the internet, running mastermind communities, sharing her knowledge, writing constant. Just the way she shared her ideas with such generosity. I was like, oh, interesting. I wanted examples of other women of the internet who were just making a living on their own terms. And so I think I
Yeah.
was always just examples of women like that were using their voice in ways to
Mm.
create an interesting living.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
husband is a role model for me in terms of his directness and he doesn't mince words. He says exactly what he means. There's a directness there that is quite uncommon for, I think, especially a lot of Canadians. We'll be
Okay.
very nice and we're very polite and we like people don't really get to the heart of what they're saying. And
Okay.
I think as someone that grew up in maybe a bit of the people pleasing where you're like trying to almost manage your parents' emotions. And so you're
Mm.
putting your own needs aside or like your needs don't matter. So to be with someone who just says, no, I don't want to do that and just says it and it's okay, like to me, my husband is a wonderful role model in that way too. So I suppose I'm always looking for people that are like reflecting a quality that maybe I see in myself, but maybe don't feel permission to fully express. And
Mm.
so it's
Oh,
who are those people that
interesting.
are reflecting that a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah. I love that idea of a role model helping you either maybe not giving you, but allowing you to say, like, the permission, allowing you to the space
totally.
for that permission to do that or to cultivate that in yourself. I love that idea.
And I think we all have different role models. We all gravitate toward different people, whether we like the way they express their ideas or something. And so I think the reason we get drawn to those people, I do think they're reflecting qualities about ourselves. There's a values piece there that I think gets, oh,
Yeah.
they're speaking to my value of this or honesty or
Yeah.
love or generosity, whatever it is. So when
Mhm.
we see people that kind of show that, I think that's where we're like, oh, I want to get there. And often we're already there, but maybe we're not, yeah, it's not fully expressed. And so I like that idea that they're just reflecting something about you that you desire about yourself or your own
Yeah.
innate qualities. And of
I
course,
I love
everyone's journey with this is personal, but I think it's the self-esteem and the finding your own voice and what's okay to express and learning those boundaries, like all of that stuff has been a real struggle for me. And so it's taken a while, I think, to find how you show up in a consistent way that feels really good and self-expressed, but also acknowledges you're gonna when you put your work out there, there's gonna be people that either don't like you, don't
Mhm.
resonate with you, feel the
Yeah.
need to make some nasty comment. Like whenever you put yourself out there, YouTube
Yeah.
videos, podcasts, whatever, there's
Yeah.
always going to be people that maybe don't like what you're up to and getting comfortable with that and saying, that's okay because my values are this. And as long as I'm living by my values, it doesn't really matter that someone whose interest in cutting people down is making those comments. So it
Mhm.
takes a while to build that sense of
Yeah.
confidence and quality.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that word consistency has been coming up a lot.
Uh,
Um, in conversations in my own thinking.
yeah.
And I think that is one of the reasons that I've gotten so interested in this idea. People say, oh, we don't have any role models anymore. Nobody's a role model. Or you just don't like the ones you have,
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
you
Right.
know, or you're seeing that maybe the front stage and the backstage aren't the same. We all have private lives. We all have off days. But I think that consistency in returning to your values and checking that, I actually have a little list of principles and statements. And it's like I check them every week or at least every month.
Yeah.
And I have little prompts. And one of them is, are you interrogating yourself? Are you genuinely making decisions based on these principles and values? Or are you just like wanting to please or whatever the shadow side you're trying to serve? And but that consistency really seems to be a key factor, I think.
Yeah, it's funny because I joke a lot. I think people with ADHD tend to struggle with consistency. And if you look at my shipping schedule of my YouTube video, it's incredibly inconsistent for sure. I
Sure.
always joke I'm not consistent with any part of my life, but I actually, being values driven or principles driven is probably like the one place where I know I'm consistent in my values, regardless of whether my output
Or
is on the content hamster wheel and shipping things. It's not always going to be doable, but am I consistently listening to my needs and listening to
sure.
what my heart is telling me and what, yeah,
Yeah.
I like that idea of
Yeah.
consistency and values, not necessarily output.
Yeah. I think that is something that I have seen in you as a longtime watcher of your YouTube and listener of what you've shared and what you've taught is I have seen that generosity in you and I have seen that commitment to doing quality work, like putting good work and good stuff out in the world while also saying, I'm not going to exploit myself. I'm not going to exploit other people. I'm not going to exploit resources. But from what I have seen, approaching your business, approaching your relationships within that business and with your broader community, it almost seems like you really have to bake that into the foundation of your business. And because it would be very hard to graft those in later, it seems like. What do
Yes.
you think in your experience?
Yeah. And I think I've always been maybe talking about or interested in values aligned business. And I think that's part of it, and I also think the energy piece of it is another part that I didn't realize how much of building a values-aligned business means I have to work with what's giving me energy and what's taking energy and being hyper aware of that, and so I
Mhm.
think that thread has always been there of, like, how do I craft something where I know I can get the best out of myself? And then when you like, I'm working with my husband as well. Okay, now this entity is a new entity, and now you've got, like, personal values and then business values too, and how do you bring 2 different people sets of values as well as a company set of values together? I think it's been inherent since the beginning that, like, I don't know how to show up any differently than saying, here I am. I don't have all the answers, but here's what I'm learning. Like, I'm
Mhm.
a curious person. Here's what I'm curious about, sharing that with people. And so I think, yeah, when you show up authentically and people are like reflecting back to you, they're connecting with you. I think at the end
Yeah.
of the day, it's connecting. It's all about
Yeah.
connecting with other
Yeah.
people.
And I think that's the biggest thing. I think that's one of the things that it seems like people are really looking for is connecting. And as someone who's made a part of her career off of being online, which is a distant relationship with the bulk of your audience,
Yeah.
I'm curious what comes up for you as someone who has ended up with I'm going to say a global audience. And
Yeah,
yeah.
I can share some of this journey because in the early years of my career, it was one-to-one services. I'm helping someone launch a website, build out their funnels, help with their product development, launch online courses. I'm like the behind the scenes, but working in partnership with a single person. The beginning of my business was mostly that. Then a lot of the
Mhm.
people I started working with, a lot of women business owners that were launching online courses, products, communities. So then I'm starting to work with people that have a one-to-many model, and I'm
Okay.
seeing the success that they're having. I'm like, okay, the people that can afford to hire me for web design services are often people that have really diversified, not just services, but they're doing products, they're doing software, they're doing like lots of other ways of bringing in revenue. So I started to see this model and I'm like, okay, is that something I could see for myself? Could I run a group program or launch a product that would a cheaper price point? Is that a thing that I could do? And so I had lots of clients that were modeling that possibility for me. So then I dipped my toe in the water with teaching a small online course, very small, doing workshops with people that were like maybe 8 to 10 people in one room. And that felt like a big deal too. I am not someone that desires like to be on stage. I don't have necessarily a bombastic personality. I love the deep conversations with small groups of people. I love that sense of intimacy. So I had to ask myself, is there a way to retain that feeling of intimacy and connection with people, but do it at scale? Is that even a thing that you can do? What does that look like? So I was asking myself a lot of these questions because there's an intimidation factor for sure of making YouTube videos and putting yourself out there and then having like running Zoom calls and teaching an online course where there's going to be possibly hundreds of people that you're not even in connection with. They're maybe watching
Sure.
replays or they're consuming the content behind the scenes. So I was working with Tanya Geisler at this time when I was trying to figure out like if I desire intimacy in the way that I work and in my relationships with people, I love feeling connected with clients. Is this a business model that can work for me? What does it mean to scale like that? And I felt very scared of that whole idea of scaling and even reaching like hundreds of people and growing my list like that. And I felt like a world that was like for other people. I'll help them do that, but I don't know if that's a world for me. Um,
Sure.
and I had to ask myself, is this my own self-esteem? Is there like,
Mm.
what's happening here? I want to like uncover it. Is this just not the best way for me to show my gifts? Or are there like self-esteem limitations? Who am I to do this? And so that's where I was working with Tanya as a leadership coach to unpack like, how do I best create value for people? Like, what does that look like? So over the years, I was experimenting with running masterminds for designers, small group programs, courses, products. I was doing little bits of it in these different communities. And it wasn't until Notion, I was in a mastermind and I had been hearing people say, if you make a course on Notion, my money, I will pay you money. And so there was like a magnetism and there wasn't a lot of people out there at the time
Mhm.
creating Notion content. In this mastermind, this friend of mine, Joel Hooks, he said, you need to make a YouTube channel ASAP. And I was like,
Okay.
oh, YouTube. No, I don't want to be a YouTuber. That sounded like my worst nightmare. But when you're sharing software and how people use software, like of course video makes the most sense to do that. So I very reluctantly, started my YouTube channel and like the traffic and the surge of people signing up for my email, like it was so fast. It was so quick.
Mm.
I was not mentally prepared for the visibility and the eyeballs and the
Okay.
attention. And suddenly my inbox is full. I have people messaging me on Twitter and like through YouTube and the comment, like it was so much to manage so fast. I'd never experienced anything like it. And I was absolutely not prepared for that kind of
Yeah.
visibility. Like it was like my self-esteem was not matched up with the attention that I was getting. And I was like,
Okay.
how do other people handle this? Like, how are people so cool? This got melting
Yeah.
down. It was
Oh
a
my
real
goodness.
challenge for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it was like
I can
a whole personal
imagine.
roller coaster. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. Because let's see, I feel like I discovered Notion 2019 or 2020.
And that would have been around the time I was probably just exploring and getting
Okay.
videos out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was right away because I think I discovered Notion. I was like, "Oh, this is cool." And then I think I discovered you and maybe August Bradley
Mhm.
about the same time, and I
Yeah.
just devoured all of the videos. But I think that was also the time when it had been around, but then it just like, and then it just went, and then up.
COVID, it just exploded. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I hope you found something that resonated with you and that encourages you to become more hopeful, creative, and wise in your own life. Make sure to check out the links in the description below and like and subscribe so that you don't miss part 2 of our conversation. Shalom.